Many of the Jews thought that the Messiah would be just for them. In other words, no Gentile could take advantage of what the Messiah would do for them. But you notice that in the first reading, the last sentence, the prophet Isaiah in the 6th century before Christ, he says at the end of his prophecy, but all people will benefit from this. What St. Paul had done, St. Paul had gone out after his conversion, and he had baptized people. In the year 50, they had the Council of Jerusalem, and for the first 20 years of Christianity, from 30 to 50, they weren't sure if what Jesus taught was a revision of Judaism or something entirely new. So in the year 50, they had a council, and they determined that what Paul had done, that it was actually new. It was not a reform of Judaism. And even some of the Reform did not like that. But what happens here, the gospel story, in one sense, tries to grab that, grapple with it, and find something that they can teach. Matthew, Tyre, and Sidon are almost exclusively pagan, Gentile characters. And so in the reading from the gospel, anybody reading that would be asked, listen carefully. And they would be asked, the story is around the woman, not around Jesus. Jesus seems insensitive, and he seems tough. But what he's doing, he's taking the stance of a number of the new Christians, that this woman had to be Jewish before Jesus could help her. The same way that the people in the second reading, baptism, these people thought brought them into Judaism. They thought this is a reform of Judaism. And the very fact that Paul baptized them, and in the year 50, the Council of Jerusalem said, no, this is something new. We know that some of those people is like us with the Vatican Council. Some of those people were so turned off by that they plotted to assassinate St. Paul. And so there's one place in the Acts of the Apostles where he is lowered in a basket over one of the walls of the city where he was, because those who thought that what Jesus taught was a reform of Judaism, they were going to assassinate him, because they said he's in heresy, and he's taught people in heresy. And even today, if we got some Orthodox Jewish people, and we said, well, we heard a reading from St. Paul, they would say, that guy's a heretic, because he drew so many people away from Judaism, the correct religion. Thank God they didn't get St. Paul. They got about it beforehand. His brother-in-law, in fact, told him, they're lying in wait for you. What they're going to do is they're going to execute you. And so St. Paul changed his plans and lived on. What happens, as I said in the gospel story, the one that he wanted people to focus on was Jesus. Jesus plays hard to get. He wants to focus on the woman, and the Gentile woman who comes and begs for the life of her child. What parent wouldn't do that? What parent, if they were told that their child has a terminal illness, wouldn't do whatever God wanted them to do for that little one to be cured? Or people we love, or people who are elderly. Who would not want to be changed if they found that they had a terminal illness? This woman, you may remember the story of the Roman centurions. They were the only two in the Gospels, the only two non-Jews, non-Christians, that Jesus cures. But in both cases, what is pointed out is the depth of the faith that they had. She persists. She's not a Jewish mother. No, she's a pagan mother. But the thing is, this is her daughter, and she's not going to give up. So she goes back to him again and again and again. And the people reading this, you and I, what Matthew is saying is focus not on Jesus, but focus on the woman whose faith is so persistent. And she is held up as the idol because what does Jesus say? Woman, because of your faith, your daughter is healed. In the same way that the Roman centurion, he's the one who said to Jesus said, I'll come and cure him. He said, Lord, you don't have to come. I'm not worthy that you should enter my house. But only say the word and my servant will be healed. Jesus did, and the servant was healed. And so what happens is, as I say in the gospel, what they want them to focus on is the faith of this woman, a Gentile, whom they don't think has faith, or the faith of the centurion. He doesn't have faith. He has not professed belief in Jesus, but he knows Jesus is a wonder worker. So does she. And what they say is, this is my daughter. This is my servant who is beloved by us. And I'm going to go to bat for them. And when they do, Jesus cures them. But what he first does is he gives this as a sign of the great faith that both of them have. He doesn't say it, but he probably thinks, I wish the apostles had this much faith. Later they would desert him, and Peter would deny him with oaths. He would swear oaths that he didn't know Jesus. And so when you compare Peter and the apostles to the centurion or to this woman, the apostles come in second place. Peter's in third place because he denied him. But when Jesus comes to heal them, he doesn't put them down. Even Peter, the way that Peter gets them is they have this catch of 153 fish. And then they say to Peter, that's the Lord. And Peter jumps in the water. And the first thing Jesus says to him is, Peter, do you love me? And he says, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. And then he said, Peter, do you love me? And Peter said, I love you. He said, feed my sheep. Peter, the third time, do you love me? And Peter said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus forgives him. Jesus would have forgiven Judas if Judas had gone back and begged for forgiveness. He would have forgiven him. He forgave all the other apostles. But Judas wouldn't come back. He thought his sin was too big to be forgiven. At the end of Matthew's gospel, he tells all of them, go forth, baptize all people, not all Jews. Jews are included, but what he means is this is new. What he says in Matthew 25, verses 31 to 46, he says, when we come at the end of the world, the sheep will be on our right and the goats are on our left. Goats were not liked very well by the Jewish people. And they will say, well, why do we deserve to get in? And he will say, when I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I needed shelter, you gave it to me. When I was sick, or in prison, you came to see me. And Jesus will say, Lord, when did I do this? And he said to the apostles, and to you and me, whenever you have done this to one of these least brothers and sisters of mine, you've done it to me. It's not as if you did it to me or like you did it. No. You did it to me. We're good at second collections here at St. Jude's. But when you do that, when they ask for a second collection, we ask for a second collection, what's happening is the money that you give for the poor, that's done to Jesus. But any good work you do to lighten people's burdens, that's done to Christ. He says it is. Whatever you've done to these least brothers and sisters of mine, you've done to me. And so what today's readings call us to do, both from Romans and from St. Matthew, it calls you and me to be persistent in prayer. One of the things in retrospect, how often we see what we prayed for came to us. But by the same token, we know that certain things that we prayed for, now we can see would not have been good for us. And so Christ doesn't answer that prayer. You know, sometimes when you and I suffer, everybody suffers. If I ask everybody here at the 11 o'clock Mass, please put your hand up if you never suffered, I don't think we see very many hands, if any. That's because it's part of life. You have, Deacon Mark has, so have I. Because it's part of living. But maybe it taught you and me something that God wanted us to know. Maybe, possibly it enables us to help those identified with the same thing that we've had and from which we've recovered. Maybe isn't the point of 12-step programs, isn't that the whole point? Where you tell people, I've been afflicted with the same thing, whether it's AA, whether it's Al-Anon, whether it's NA, Narcotics Anonymous. Isn't the point of that we tell other people, I've been afflicted with that, I got over it, I'm still sober, so can you. It's not impossible. You've got the support of all these people. Some things we'll have to wait until you and I are on the other side of eternity to find out. Father Friedel, who died last February, who lived with us, he told me one time, he said his mother was 96 when she died. And when they would talk to her, she would say, I wonder about a lot of things that have happened to us as a family. And she said, when I die and see God, I'm going to ask him to explain himself. I think my mother would say the same thing. And that will happen. When you and I are on the other side of eternity, we'll know things that maybe now we treat as mystery. We'll know things that maybe, why did I suffer this? Why did my loved ones suffer this? All kinds of questions that when you and I die, that our Lord will answer. Let's then, as we go on, help anybody in our parish who's seeking the kind of answer. Maybe you could say, I had that, and I got over it, or here's the doctor that I went to, or whatever. Because that's basically here what Jesus promises. Nothing will happen to you that hasn't happened to me first. Crucifixion was a horrible way to die, and I think myself, that's why he did it. So that you and I would always know that there's no suffering that got beyond him. Crucifixion was a horrible way to die. Painful to the max. And he did it for you and for me. And if there was only one of us, if you were the only one or I was, he'd still do it. As we go on with this Mass this morning, ask him to give us fortitude, the virtue of fortitude, which is the virtue of courage, and also to deepen, as this woman has, a Gentile, the kind of deep faith that she had that even the apostles did not have, especially Peter. Or the centurion who begged for his servant, who would bet money that he was close to the family. And so as we go on, we ask the Lord to help anybody in our parish, even to be a listening ear for them, if that's what they need. Amen.